Thank you so much. It's totally thrilling to be here. In front, you are an incredible audience. You are people of influence, and so I really am so thrilled that you're going to hear from Maria, who I believe is really one of the most important voices in the world today. But I've got to know Maria as a friend, and there's one thing you need to know, which is that she presents as this very smiling, optimistic, cheerful presence. And it turns out that that is exactly what she's like under the surface as well. And this is despite being one of the most trenchant critics who has really explained to the world how social media is being weaponized by populists and authoritarians, and how that's why we are witnessing this global assault on democracy. And there's so much I could say, but I mean, just a tiny bit of how much of a sort of shining light Maria has been in our community, and the way that she has overcome these sort of incredible obstacles with such grace and courage. And she's going to blush terribly, so maybe I should move on. Maria, you heard from Alessandra just how you have been relentlessly and personally targeted as a result of this work, and just essentially for doing your job as a journalist.
You know this. It's happened to you.
And I know that you spoke at Skoll a couple of years ago, and I thought people really just want to know what the latest is on that, because Maria was charged with cyber libel. She's facing a prison sentence. The last time I saw her before the pandemic, her lawyers had told her that if she returned to the Philippines, she was likely to be detained and imprisoned. And Maria nonetheless went. So can you just sort of bring us up to date on where things are at the moment for you?
So the first lesson I learned in all of this is that the predictions of horrendous things happening may not happen. I'm still here, not in jail, and but it was difficult. I mean, this is my 37th year as a journalist, and I'd never lived through anything like this before. The last time we saw each other in February 2020, right before the lockdown. And at that point, starting in 2019, every 6 weeks or so, I get a criminal charge. So starting 2019, I had 10 criminal cases. It is now 2023. 7 of those have been pushed out, i.e. like January this year, I had 34 years possible jail sentence thrown out. It took 4 years and 2 months, but it was thrown out. So we have 3 criminal charges left. In order to be here, thank you, Skoll, for your patience. I have to ask for court approvals all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court knows every instance of where I am. And it's okay, right? It's kind of like climate change.
Do you see what I mean about the relentless positivity? It is, it's kind of amazing, but it is also, it's also sort of baffling in the way that I don't know how you do it. I mean, and that is, I think everybody says that about you, don't they? But one of the things Maria is so good at explaining, which I thought would be so helpful for this audience, is you're so good at explaining how actually it was the social media campaign against you and against Maria's news organization, Rappler, that came first. She was vilified online first, and then that created a culture in which it sort of created permission almost, didn't it, for you to face, to then be targeted legally. And it's this fundamental thing, which is understanding that what happens online does not stay online. It actually bleeds into the real world. And that's what your experience sort of taught you firsthand, wasn't it?
Both of ours, right? We became very good friends going through this together. But it's the same, whether it's in the Philippines or in Hungary or in the UK or in the US. Say a lie a million times, it becomes a fact, so it comes up bottom up. For me, it was journalist equals criminal. on social media. That was 2016. Then about a year later, it comes top down. Our president then, Duterte, says the exact same thing. A week later, I got my first subpoena. Rappler got its first subpoena. And then that's 2017, 14 investigations, 2018, we got our first shutdown order. We fought back immediately because I was just in shock. 2019, all those arrest warrants, and then 2020, the conviction.
And it started on the platforms, right? It started on the tech platforms. And the amazing thing about Maria is that she could actually see it happening, because as well as leading her own news organization, you're actually partnering with Facebook, is that correct? That you, as fact-checking partners. So you had the data and could actually see in real time what was happening.
I think part of it is I used to track terrorists. This was what I did with CNN before I moved on and went back to the Philippines. That's important because how do you track the spread of a virulent ideology? Social network analysis, before the time of social media. And then what we realized, and this is the audience that needs to know this, right? Everything you do on this, everything you post. In the Philippines, I focused on Facebook because now 100% of Filipinos on the internet are on Facebook. Facebook is our internet, right? Very like Myanmar. Remember what happened in Myanmar? Anyway, here's everything that you post on Facebook, on any platform, is picked up by machine learning. Machine learning creates a model of you that knows you better than you know yourself. Replace the word model with clone, right? Because what the companies say is that they own this model of you because they use machine learning. So then AI comes in. This is the first time we see AI, and you know what social media has done. I will tell you before we go to ChatGPT, but so AI scoops all of our clones. That becomes the motherlode database that micro-targets each of us on these platforms. This is a clone of you. You didn't give permission for that. And micro-targeting is about as far away from advertising as you can get, right? This is, other people have said this, you will hear from others like Tristan Harris, who knows this. This is a different world. It looks vaguely familiar, but I always compare it to Netflix, the Upside Down, because the basic value turned the world upside down. In 2018, MIT showed that lies spread at least 6 times faster than facts. So imagine if you tell your child, lie, I'll reward you. And you keep telling everyone around you, lie all the time, I will keep rewarding you. Think of the value system that's turned upside down and how that cascades to every single system that we live in. Last thing I will say, sorry, I want you to see the tech because, and it's the data, because in the Nobel lecture, so we have no facts. Because you say a lie 1,000,000 times, it becomes a fact. Lies spread faster than facts. So if you have no facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Without these 3, we have no shared reality. We have no democracy.
I'm going to butt in there.
I know, I'll shut up.
No. So I want to talk about the Nobel Prize a bit. So there is an incredibly cute video online where you can see Maria, she's in a Zoom call, she's on a Zoom meeting, when she's told that she's won the Nobel Prize. And it's this amazing moment, which was such a cause of sort of joy and celebration. But also, there was also something profoundly chilling about that moment, which was the Nobel Prize committee had decided to award it to 2 journalists, to Maria and to the Russian editor Dmitry Murazov. And it was the first time the Nobel Committee had given the prize to journalists since 1935. And the last time it awarded it to that journalist, he couldn't come to collect it because he was in a Nazi concentration camp. So the Nobel Prize Committee are very clearly sending a message here about the state of democracy, the state of journalism, and the relationship between the two. I mean, what do you think that their message is, and what do the people what do people really need to understand about that moment of that sort of being on the brink of something?
A lot of this forced me to put into words these things that float around us, our context. And I compared the tech that connects us, because that's what they supposedly do, and I'll put that in quotes, right, to an atom bomb, right? These tech companies that have taken over the distribution of news. I became a journalist because information is power. When that distribution system is corrupted because lies spread faster than facts, an atom bomb exploded in our information ecosystem. If we cannot be in the same reality, I mean, look at the basic, we kind of just accepted it, right? This was as early as 2014. They kept saying, it will be so personalized, you can create your own reality. That's called an insane asylum, right? So this is, now think of, everything else that we deal with is a cascading failure from the lack of a shared reality. When Twitter first came out with this, and Facebook started talking about personalization, Rappler, my advantage is I run a news organization, we built the tech platform, and I'm the journalist under attack. And only the person under attack sees everything. You only see bits and pieces of it. But it's enough to change what you think. So as the person under attack, I began to feel it. And no matter how smart you are, by design, these companies have created something that will bypass your bright, brilliant mind and goes directly to your emotions.
I mean, one of the things, Maria, I think you do so powerfully is this communicating this idea, which is so fundamental, which is that we cannot take democracy for granted. And, you have really witnessed this in your own lifetime and your own career in the Philippines. And you have seen how quickly it has gone from, very democratic forms of governance to something which is authoritarian, and the way that technology is enabling that form of authoritarianism. Can you just sort of explain about why you sort of see in the way the Philippines almost a petri dish for other countries in the world? We're just a little bit further behind.
Actually, that's interesting, that word petri dish. That is petri.
Tomato, tomato.
Yeah, I know. This is actually, the person who said that is Chris Wiley, the Cambridge Analytica whistleblower that Carole worked with to break this story. Death by 1,000 cuts, there's so many ways to talk about it, but I lived through it. I have the data to prove it. I went from being a journalist asking questions to having to face over 100 years in prison. We shouldn't have to suffer this much to give you freedom. So, how does it happen? Let's start with algorithms. The definition of an algorithm, opinion in code. So think of one editor replicated 1 million times. And just 2 algorithms, and then I'll pull it out macro, right? 2 algorithms. The friends of friends algorithm, which every social media platform uses for growth, right? What does friends of friends do? It reinforces cognitive bias. But what it did in the Philippines in 2016 was this, when Rodrigo Duterte was alerted. So information operations, by 2014, they were beginning. In the Philippines, Marcos, that name, was being changed in front of our eyes. In Russia, in Crimea, Russia ceded the meta-narrative that was used in 2022 to invade Ukraine itself, right? So cede the meta-narrative. In 2016, the political dominoes began to fall. One of the meta-narratives ceded was Where are we? Here, in the UK, right? So in the Philippines, it was, if you were pro-Duterte, that Friends of Friends algorithm, you move further right. If you're anti-Duterte, you move further left. And take it year by year by year. Friends of Friends, you can use Trump as well. You have lots of choices. Then another algorithm, which is a radicalization algorithm. This one, let's use YouTube. You're fed. You don't have a choice oftentimes, right? The recommendation engine feeds you video to keep you scrolling. It's a business model, Shoshana Zuboff. We didn't get this name for the business model until 2019. And what keeps you scrolling? Oh, well, more extremist content. If you like carrots, you'll be fed more extremist carrot content, right? Just to keep you scrolling. So what happens is you go down a rabbit hole. Let me put it in the context of Brazil, because this is a Harvard study. In Brazil, they started looking at the algorithms that looked at Zika and then the rise of Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro was a total far-right fringe figure. But the algorithms, the recommendation clustering algorithms of YouTube, in this study was shown to actually cluster together far-right with all the conspiracy theorists, providing the support base that carried Bolsonaro from the far right to the presidency and on to the January 8th violence, right? This is not reflecting society. This is creating something that is the worst of who we are as people.
I want to come in there briefly because we don't have much time left, sadly. But there's
oh my God.
the thing is, I think I wanted to sort of like ask you about is there's people in this audience, they're tackling all of these urgent crises: the climate crisis, global hunger, social inequality. But yet the information crisis, and this is a crisis, this sort of what we're seeing in the information ecosystem, this is foundational to all of these others, isn't there?
To everything else, right? You cannot solve any global problem if our information ecosystem is corrupted, if lies spread faster than facts.
So we've got 2 minutes 37 left. Maria, what do we do? What's the solutions? Tell us.
No, but if you're under attack, you throw spaghetti against the wall, and I have 3. I hope you get out of here, you stand up, and you go do it, right? The first is, we had a Venn diagram of, this is when we created Rappler in 2012, technology, journalism, community, and Rappler sat in the middle. So let's look at the tech answers. The long-term, education; medium-term, legislation; short-term, it is just us, right? You have to look at what civic engagement looks like in the age of exponential lies. It isn't the old ways. So what we did, civil society move into data and tech, the same way journalists need to embrace data and tech. So in the Philippines, in May 2022, I have 1:44, wow. All right, here, 4-layer pyramid, whole of society approach. The bottom layer, we organized over nearly 150 groups. Bottom layer, 16 news organizations who normally competed with each other. We put fact checks together. There were KPIs of every news group that needed to do a certain number of fact checks. They don't spread, right? They don't spread on social media. So what's the second layer? Civil society. This is called the mesh. Civil society, 116 groups that included NGOs, human rights activists, environmental groups, the church, business groups. The church and the business groups were critical. Their task daily leading up to our elections is to share these very boring fact checks with emotions. And they couldn't use anger, because anger spreads fast, right? Fastest. And what we found in the 3 months we ran this experiment is, they couldn't use anger. Inspiration spreads as fast as anger. We were able to take over the center of the information ecosystem with facts. The third layer is our academic institutions were in one, right? And every week they took the data, because what united this was a data pipeline gathered by the news groups, processed by us, went to the researchers, and then they every week told our people what was being seeded, who was being attacked. 1 hour every week. The last layer was the most important, the fourth layer, law. How do you have rule of law without facts? You can't, right? So finally the lawyers came in, 6 legal groups, the main legal groups of the Philippines. They filed over 20 cases to protect the facts first PH pyramid, that's what we called it. And the lawyers were so enthusiastic and they were so gung-ho, and those poor journalists at the bottom were so exhausted that they asked, our lawyers actually came in and did a lot more. We continue this moving forward, but this is
a template. Essentially, Maria designed this template ahead of the election in the Philippines, but you believe it can be rolled out in other countries around the world, right?
Other countries. So our partner here was the Google News Initiative, and a San Francisco startup called Midan that created that data pipeline for us, right? So yes, it is being rolled out in other countries. If you have an election coming out, give me just 2 more minutes. If you have an election coming out, if you don't have integrity of facts, how do you have integrity of elections? You don't. This is the reason why in just a year we've had, this is the VDEM report in 2022, 60% of the world was under authoritarian rule. In 2023, that number moved to 72%. And between January this year and 2024, there will be 90 elections. And 2024, when we look at the numbers, is a tipping point, right? 3 key ones. I mean, we think you know your country if you're having elections, but the 3 key ones that we're tracking: India, the world's largest democracy; Indonesia, the world's largest Muslim population; and the United States.
Maria, we've overstayed our time slot. I'm in such trouble.